Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. The main aim of our podcast is to provide tips and ideas to help solve your money and retirement stuff and get your money working harder for you. To help me on this today, I'm joined by Jeff Thurecht, who is a personal financial advisor and director of Evalesco Financial Services. With over 20 years providing financial advice, he works with his clients to help achieve what is important to them in their life. And it's not just about the financial, as he and his team work on the healthy, wealthy, happy philosophy in all that they do. Funny enough, this may not sound like what you would expect from a financial advisor, so maybe before we invite our guest on, here is a 60-second recap of financial advice in Australia. As up until about 50 years ago, traditional financial advisors only looked after your insurance and savings. The old AMP National Mutual agents, for example, for those of you that remember. The introduction of superannuation and easy access to the share market changed all that and came the birth of the modern investment advisor. In the last 10 years, there's been also some major changes to the finance industry and advice profession. Advisors now range from the holistic to the specialist, as you can find advisors who work just for your super fund, others who specialize in millennials, for example, others just on debt, budgeting, aged care, and now retirement coaches and podcasters like myself. So access to help on money has never been easier. So together, Jeff and I are going to provide our top 3 tips each to help you with your money and retirement goals. I should add that Jeff's dog, Suki, also wanted to join today's podcast, so you may hear her at 1 or 2 points along the way. The joys of working from home. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Marc. Great to be here.
Let's start with a bit of background. You grew up in the country, I believe.
I did. I grew up most of my childhood in Yass, which is down near Canberra. A lot of people know where Yass is because they've driven past it on their way from Sydney to Melbourne or something along those lines, but not many people go into Yass these days. It was a great upbringing. I really enjoyed my time there. I played a lot of sport and that suited me really well. Had a fair bit of freedom to wander around the town and catch up with mates and ride our bikes. And it's interesting as I reflect on that, very different to my children. I live in Annandale now, which is close to the centre of Sydney, and so my children having a very different upbringing, being in the middle of the city to what I did in the country. But I think kids adjust and make the most of what you got, don't they?
Absolutely. So what was the reason to come to the big smoke?
For me, it was mainly about work. So I had all my aunties and uncles and my grandparents lived in Sydney when I was a kid, so we spent a fair bit of time in Sydney, so I knew it reasonably well. I did have thoughts about, staying in Yass and working in Canberra because it's not that far away, and that was on my mind for a while. But over time, I realised there's many more opportunities, and it was a little bit more exciting coming to the big smoke for work.
Okay. I was talking previously before about the change and how advisors have changed over the years. And one of my biggest concerns, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, is the affordability of advice and the value that it provides. I believe, and that's why I've become a coach and helping specifically people to retire. There's others helping budgeting, people helping aged care, but you take a more holistic approach. So do you want to tell us a bit about how Evalesco do that?
Yeah, sure. So we talk about empowering our clients to be healthy, wealthy, and happy. So our view is that there's no point being really wealthy if you're really unhealthy and really unhappy. So looking at, understanding what makes people happy and what do they enjoy doing to be healthy. And that's different for everybody that comes across, to see us. So it's very much about personalising the advice. It's very much about helping them with what's important to them and not necessarily a templated or a one-size-fits-all type of solution. We try also to try and look across the whole gamut of their financial life and be an advisor and a sounding board for all of those different aspects. And so the relationships we build with our clients are fairly deep and fairly broad. And that means that you've got to spend the time to get to know clients, and there's got to be a level of trust there. And to do that, to make it worthwhile, there's got to be a lot of value that we can add. And we do see that, we add more value to our clients when we are able to build those types of relationships and have a broader base for that advice, rather than just being a transactional or, one-off short-term relationship. So that's how we've evolved over time and found that that's the way that we can be of most benefit and most value to our clients.
And the good thing with the modern advisor, basically you see your clients every year and you're really pretty well renewing the relationship every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of how we, engage with our clients. Now we're very, very focused on, we have a 12-month engagement, which we want to have an ongoing relationship with our clients for years and years and years. But we do review that every 12 months and say, well, what have we done over the last 12 months and what do we need to do over the next 12 months and how should we work together to make sure that we keep our clients on track to achieving the important things in their life.
Okay, so probably we could go on to now moving into the fun stuff, some helpful top tips. Everyone likes to hear top tips regardless of what the subject is. So I've got my top 3 tips. Jeff, you've got your top 3 tips. As a guest, I'll let you go first. What's your first top tip on money and management?
Sure. So my first top tip would be make a plan and use your money mindfully. So when I talk about that, it's really, something that's pretty common in society these days is FOMO. So everybody's fear of missing out, keeping up with the Joneses, spending money on things that, they don't necessarily need to. So it's about getting clear on what's important to you and understanding, what that means from a resourcing and a planning viewpoint and spending your money on those things that are important. So, a good example we have is, a client recently had been saving, had some decent savings. They also came into an inheritance and they came in and saw us and they said, oh, well, I guess I should go out and buy a property now. And we said, oh, why do you say it like that? And they said, well, it seems to be what everybody else does. But when we drilled in a little bit, they really had no desire to own property, didn't want to be tied down to a big mortgage or a, permanent address. They wanted to be able to travel and be fairly free. So, when we told them, well, you don't have to buy property, that's just something you could do, that was quite liberating for them. So that's just an example of, thinking about understanding what's important to you and making sure your plan is working towards that.
Okay, so going a little bit further than that, just for people, if they're not seeing an advisor, but it's still a great tip, setting down some goals. You set, say, for example, a short-term goal, a medium-term goal, long-term goal, and get them to write it. For me, I tell people just write it down on a single piece of paper and stick it on the fridge so you see it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that it's visible. I think it's also important to break it down into steps and say, well, what do you need to do over the next, I like to do quarterly personally. So what do we need to do over the next quarter to make sure we're on track to our shorter term goal, which might be a 12-month, 2-year goal, our medium term goal and our long term goal. So if you break it down to quarterly bite-sized chunks, it can help you to see the progress. And progress is such an important psychological, part of the overall achievement of things, because if you're not making progress, it's really hard to stick to a plan. And so being able to see that progress on a quarterly basis, we find is really helpful.
Yeah, no, good. No, that's a really good point. Making a plan, it's the start of everything. For me, probably one of my favorite tips is that in anything you're doing, and it's sort of what you were saying before about buying a property, I actually still like that concept. In that, borrowing for really good income producing assets rather than borrowing for bad assets. Like if you buy a car, buying the fanciest car, it's great for a lifestyle, but it's not great as an asset because basically as soon as you drive out of the showroom, it goes down a third in value and it doesn't provide an income. A property provides an income, a share portfolio provides income. And so as long as you borrow for good quality assets, and I know the guy, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's his number one tip is always borrowing for good assets rather than borrowing for bad assets. So that would be my first tip. Okay, what's your second tip, Jeff?
So I think, thinking about your money mindfully and what you want to use your money for, the next part of it is really make sure that you spend less than you earn and invest the balance in good quality growth assets. So building on what you said, growth assets being shares and property. So putting your surplus cash flow to use in those. Now, with property, to your point, Mark, it's often about borrowing. So your surplus cash flow goes to servicing the debt or the gap between what a tenant might be paying and what your interest costs are and costs of maintaining that property. So using your savings for that is a really great way of getting leverage and growing your asset base. With shares, we really like the idea of regular investment plans into shares. So you can do that via managed funds or those types of vehicles, but putting money in on a monthly basis is a really great strategy for those types of assets because, the share market goes up and down and that sometimes scares people. But if you look at it over a long period of time and you're buying every month, it smooths out the entry point that you're having, makes it less volatile, and it makes it easier to stick to that strategy. And so often we have clients, come in after they've had a regular investment plan in place for a few years and they're amazed by how much is accumulated in that plan because they've got money that they've forgotten that they're putting that money away each month, or they don't miss that money each month. And all of a sudden after, 3, 4, 5 years, it's built up to a really significant little nest egg, which is, a fantastic use of that surplus cash flow.
Yeah, I think, and I know the technical term is dollar cost averaging. So when we often talk to our clients on that sort of subject, but it's just not trying to pick the timing of the share market. It's just making sure you just do it every month, and some months it'll be up, some months it'll be down, but on averaging it out, you're going to come out ahead. I think actually probably my second tip will be along the same lines in getting disciplined in that savings. And I know a lot of people say they live pay packet to pay packet. By the end of the month, or if they get paid fortnightly, however they get paid, they just don't have enough money to save. And so my usual tip is that you always pay yourself first. So whenever your pay comes on the first of the month, that as soon as it gets in an hour, and you try and make maybe an automatic debit, and you just have an amount going over into another savings account. So at least you've got your savings out of the way, because disciplined savings, as you would know from your clients and my 30 odd years in this, that is the hardest thing for people to do, is to save.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes a lot of sense to me as well.
And just on that, because just to probably get your view on this, that's one of the things we saw with COVID in 2020. 3.4 million Australians took the 10,000 out of their super. So really, it showed that a lot of Australians didn't have 1, 2, 3 months worth of savings in a nest egg. When you talk to your clients about getting a bit of a nest egg, do you have a sort of, well, you should have 3 months salary or 3 months? What do you say?
Yeah, we talk about a minimum of 3 months of expenses. So household expenses as your cash buffer, preferably 6 months. Right. So, working towards 6 months, but starting with 3 months as a minimum. And, our experience through COVID was, I think we had across our client base and across our business, we've got 1,000 households that, we kind of give advice to roughly. I think we had 3 people who took money out of super over that period of time. And, those people didn't really want to, but it was, necessary for them at the time. But I think that was just a good example. And our clients, I think it was a really good opportunity to reflect on. We talked to them about all this boring stuff, which is pretty boring, having, 3 months or 6 months worth of expenses in cash and a buffer there. But it was, at these times where they reflected and went, oh, now I see why that was important and why you've been banging on at that for the last 10 years of me being a client to make sure we always had that money. So that was a good, I guess, reinforcement that we don't expect these types of scenarios to happen, but they do and they can. And having that cash buffer is really important.
Yeah, and it probably leads into that's a safety net. The basis of any good financial plan, regardless of what your goals, is having a good safety net in place. That's a nest egg is one of it. Having life insurance, getting a review on your insurance, and making sure you've got a will. How do you actually, it'd be good, I know we're going slightly off topic, but this is good. What do you do when you're talking about insurance and estate planning? Is that part of what you do for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually worked for an insurance company early in my career in financial services, and that was, really reinforced to me the value of having that insurance, because I was helping advisors with, managing claims and getting claims paid, and That was quite confronting as a young person to see, what people were going through, but also the value that insurance provided. So insurance is a really big part of what we do. And I think it's, to my viewpoint, it's kind of, there's no point having this fantastic plan that you're building if something's, something little or something big happens, and that plan just becomes irrelevant. So, we're building this plan. We're focused. I'm an optimist. I always like to look on the bright side of life. Yep. and assume that things are going to go well. But I'm also, my experience tells me that isn't always the case. So making sure that we've got insurance in place, that we're not exposing people to undue risk. It's all about risk management, isn't it? It's about,
absolutely,
if you're investing your income on a regular basis, if you're borrowing money to buy property, then everything relies on that income. If your income isn't there for a period of time, then you're really at risk of, personal difficulty. So having insurance in place, and also to protect your loved ones if you do die prematurely, and not leave them with any debts or hassles, financial hassles, is really important as well.
Yeah, and you're not getting insurance because you're trying to make your loved ones or dependents rich. You're just trying to make sure that they have dignity and you can enjoy the same lifestyle that you're enjoying now. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. Okay, now your last tip.
Yeah. So my third tip is make use of smart superannuation strategies. So super's, often controversial sort of topic and a bit confusing for some people, but it really is our very own onshore tax haven. So, we talk about the rich and famous having their, offshore tax havens and saving tax there. We've all got access to our own onshore tax haven here through super.
So just explain that a bit more. So why is it a tax haven?
So within super, when you're growing your super and you're contributing to it and it's building up, you pay less tax on the earnings and capital gains that you might make in your super than you probably would if you invested in your own name. So you're paying capital gains tax at 10 to 15% of any gains that you make in super. Whereas in your own name, if you're earning a salary and then you're making some gains on top of that, you're probably going to be paying capital gains tax at, somewhere between 20 and up to 47%. On your income within super, whilst you're growing it, you're paying income tax on your earnings on, dividends or rents or interest at 15%. Whereas, as we all know, earning money in our own name, we pay a lot more tax than that. Yeah. And then when you get to retirement, and you're accessing your super, you can access it as a tax-free income stream or a tax-free lump sum. So all the tax is being paid all the way through at a reduced rate. And then when you get to retirement, you've got this lump sum which you can get your hands on, or you've got an income stream, which is our preferred method of people getting access to the super, is to draw it as an income stream each year. So to replace your salary when you stop working, and that's tax-free, which is pretty awesome.
Absolutely. And as you say, it is the only legal tax haven available to Australians. So we should all try and take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. Now, you were saying, yes, super strategies. You were talking about your top tip.
Yeah. So it comes back to understanding what's important to you, and that changes at various times of life. So it's not a matter of putting all your money in super from, the day you get your first job and putting all your savings in super isn't necessarily. It's about being smart with how you use it. So you can get some tax deductions by putting extra contributions into super, and that might be appropriate for you at different stages of life to get that tax deduction and put some more money into super. You can also put in lump sums into super at various times in life as well, which can be beneficial to you. And then when you get to retirement, it's about working out how you draw that down and access it in a tax-effective way. So, I would always encourage people to think about super as a good opportunity to put a little bit more in, because the benefits of compound interest is that if you start earlier, then that compound interest grows over time. So if you start putting in a little bit of money when you're 30, that's going to grow a lot more than if you wait till you're 50 and try all of a sudden to catch up. It's very hard to catch up on that 20 years worth of growth that you've got on that money. So thinking about how it fits into your overall plan, and chipping away at putting a little bit more in, and then building that up as you can, as your surplus income allows.
Yeah, and I suppose with a lot more people renting than than having their own home, or even if they're getting investment properties, super definitely is going to be either the second biggest asset you have in your lifetime or the biggest asset in your lifetime. So, I get most people think superannuation is a boring topic, but having at least understanding where your money is invested and looking at your annual statement is important, just to be aware of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Most people, you probably have a better idea of the stats than me, but most people are just in a default option and don't give it any thought. And usually that default option we find is not necessarily the most appropriate investment for them at the time. So a default option for somebody in their early 50s might be a more conservative, slightly balanced or more conservative fund. Whereas if you're going to be working for another 15 or 20 years, then it would make sense for you to be invested more in shares and property, which are going to give you a better return, even if they do go up and down a little bit over that time, over that 15 to 20 years. Most people don't even think about that. And that's just a simple tick a box, and it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, I think, I've still got my last tip to go, but I think actually this is a really good point, because it's something that I harp on about, and will definitely through these podcasts, you'll hear more than once, in that the default for most is in the balance or growth, and for super funds, and you only just have to go look at your annual super statement to see that. And I think from the stats, it's over 80% of Australians are in the default. A simple tick and you could go into the high growth, and this is important. This is not advice, but just the simple facts are the historic. If you take the last 10, 20 years of a high growth fund, whichever super fund you're in, compared to the default or balanced fund, is usually a better return of by 2 or 3% extra. You get 2 or 3% extra per annum over a 20-year period, your super fund would nearly double. And that's doing nothing but getting your money working harder for you. And so we'll definitely talk more about the benefits of a high growth fund in other episodes, but just definitely look, definitely from what Jeff's saying about super, have a look at your statement, see where your money's invested, get your money working as hard as possible for you. Okay, so my tip is actually going back to your first one, which was the plan. I think that's probably only half of a plan, and I definitely know advisors are very good at this in keeping you accountable. I really like that. It doesn't matter, if you're the number one, if you're Roger Federer, your number one tennis player in the world, he still feels he needs a coach, someone who keeps him on track, who puts the exercise. Is definitely not going to make him, probably the coach is never usually a better tennis player than that, but he's just there to make sure he is accountable. He sets himself goals, whether that's short-term, medium, long-term, and just make sure he's accountable. And I just think it's just like when most people have New Year's resolutions, and over 90% of people, they've stopped within 3 months. It's normally because, we're human beings, we keep busy, we're all life's busy, and there's no one keeping ourselves accountable. And so financial advisors are great at keeping you accountable and being there year after year. But regardless, if it's not a financial advisor, having a friend, having a relative, someone who is very pragmatic, who you're quite happy to every 6 months or a year sit down and say, yep, this is where I'm at, this is my goals, and am I on target, or I've not hit my target, and why haven't I hit my target? Just something you do that, because if you're left to your own devices, it's just unfortunate. We're all human and we're just fallible. So that's my definitely number one tip, is be accountable to someone, because it's the easiest way to reach any goals.
I think that's really good. Could I just add a couple of things?
Absolutely, please. Yep.
I think that checking in with somebody so you can track your progress, because again, coming back to what I was saying earlier, making progress is really important to see that. But if you can have someone you can talk to about it and say, this is the progress I've made, and yes, I'm on track to where I thought it would be, or no, I'm not, so what do we need to do differently? That can really help on a regular basis. I think the other part of that accountability, and I think a coach or an advisor really helps in this, is to, in the most polite way, stop people making stupid decisions. So, it's things like, in March last year when the share market dived, a lot of people sold out to cash. in their super fund or in their investment portfolio because they got really nervous about the investment markets. Now, if they had somebody to talk to, that might have been the right decision for them. I mean, I find it hard to think it would have been, but, it might have been. But if they had someone to talk to and bounce that off and I would say to them, well, why do you think that's a good idea? How does that fit in with your overall plan? Have your goals changed? Has your timing changed? Do you not have your buffer in cash? Do we just need to get a little bit of cash out? Those types of things, as opposed to these knee-jerk reactions, which is where people tend to come unstuck. So we've got, lots of examples where we really like our clients to get in touch with us before they make decisions, when they start thinking about things, and just say, what do you think about this? So I've got a call this afternoon with a client who's recently bought a property, which he's really pleased with. And then another one's come up, similar property, and he really likes to look at that. And he's saying, do you think I should buy this one as well? My initial thought is probably not, but, let's have a talk about it and say, well, why do you think it's a good idea? Has your plan changed? What's different now, to try and help him to make sure that he makes an informed decision just by, it'll be his decision at the end of the day.
Yes.
But just by talking through it with me, hopefully he'll make a better informed decision. And that's, again, the value of having somebody from an accountability viewpoint to say, well, is that the right thing to do for your plan, or has the plan changed? And let's work out, why and how and what the new plan is.
Yeah, I know. I definitely spoke to someone March last year after they had moved their whole super fund to cash, and after a drop, because they said, well, the share market always takes at least a year to 2 years to bounce back. I'm just going to leave it in cash. Unfortunately, the share market bounced back within 3 months. So, faster than it's ever done before. So it's very difficult to time the market, and it's just better to sort of, I know this is definitely something you believe in, keeping a certain amount aside for cash, especially for retirees, 2 years salary or income in cash, so that if the share market does drop, well, that's all right. You've got enough cash to see you through and to give it time to recover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on, if we're talking about cash, because we're one of the things that is really important, if you get right to the basis of anything, and I do see a lot of advisors now spending a lot of time with their clients on cash flow coaching and just getting that cash flow, because the basis of any really good plan is that you actually spend less than you actually make. So how is the cash flow? Any person in their own business knows that they've got to get the cash flow right. And so people are seeing more and more, how do I actually get the cash right before I can start looking at anything else, investing in super, investing in shares, property, and so on. So how do you help your clients in cash flow? I know there's a couple of really good free programs out there. I believe you use My Prosperity. So tell me a bit about that, because I think that is very important for a lot of people, that cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. It's really the foundation of building a sustainable long-term plan or a sustainable long-term business, to your example. For us in our business, I guess there's a bit of a spectrum that we take on that as well. So some clients come to us and they just don't have a good handle at all on what they're spending their money on, where it's going, and they're just not able to save. So we might work with them on a more, almost a remedial basis, and trying to dig into, where the money's going. And that's where we use a tool like My Prosperity, where you can link up your bank accounts, you categorize your different types of spending, you look at your income that's coming in, and we can do a deep analysis on that and go, well, did you know that you're spending 10% more a month on eating out than your peer group, or than what you thought? And some of them, just by having those numbers, will go, oh my God, I didn't realize we were spending so much money on those areas. So that allows you really to dig into it. And then you say, okay, well, where do you think you might be able to cut back? And then we set a budget for them. We work with them to set a budget or a spending plan. Some people don't like the word budget. I don't really like the word budget either, but a spending plan, and say, well, this is where you should, this is what you think you should be spending money on. This is how you think you should be spending your money. And then we track that for, 3 months, 6 months, and we report on it monthly in the early days, because if you only look at it every 6 months or 12 months and you end up being 20% out, it might have been something that happened 5 months ago that made you blow out. So if we can track it monthly and just kind of go, well, almost like a traffic light report, if you look at it and everything's okay, then it's a green light, tick, great, keep doing what you're doing. if you're a little bit over in your spending, then, let's have a quick look at it and see what we can fix up. If you've blown it out, then let's jump on it quickly and get on top of it straight away. So that's kind of the deep dive remedial part of cash flow planning. And then once you've done that for 6 months or so, you get comfortable. You might have to adjust the budget. The budget might be wrong as well. Adjust the budget, and then you get your savings going towards your emergency cash buffer sort of bucket for a period of time. You build that up, and then you start your regular savings towards your goal or your regular investment plan as well. The other part of it is clients who have a bit better of a handle on their spending, and they don't really want to look at the detail of it. They say, okay, well, we're saving $1,000 a month. We think we're pretty comfortable with that. That's working for us. How do we make the most of that $1,000 a month? And that's really then, okay, so do you put a bit more to pay off your mortgage because you've got a little bit to go on your mortgage, or do we increase your super contributions or a regular investment plan? But that's the type of advice we might be looking at in that case.
So just one of the things also is you're saying, and I like that you do it month to month, and that's the way I definitely recommend it. And this is a whole first chapter in my book is on this. And one of it you were saying before is about those positives. If you get in early, and a lot of this is not major changes, it's just tweaking, but you get these small wins and you feel more better about it, because I totally agree. You call it a budget, negative connotations. I don't want to be tied down. It's going to make me miss out on all the good stuff. I get that. But if you can do cash flow, get little wins, see where you can find extra savings, it just makes such a big difference to you. And to me, you're just getting control. That's it. You don't know this stuff, but you get in control of it.
Yeah. And that's where, there's some big wins that you can have. It could be, if you've got a mortgage, that's a really big one. It's how have you got that structured? What interest rate? If you've been with a bank for 10 years, you're probably paying way more in interest than you should be, because the bank doesn't come to you each year and go, we've just reduced our interest rates. We'll give you a bit of a saving. Typically, they'll just, keep it where it was and you miss out. So, you can renegotiate on that, which might mean you end up spending the same amount each month, but you're paying it more quickly, or you might better reduce your repayments a little bit because that makes sense in your overall plan. So I guess, then you look at health insurance. You can review your health insurance, and your book has got a lot of good detail on some of those sorts of things that you can look at as well. So if you get into the nitty gritty, it's not hard to find, but it's also just being mindful of what you're spending your money on. I think that's a great starting point as well, because a lot of people don't know where the money goes. Yeah. And some people feel okay about that, and some people feel very uncomfortable about that, and often that's an impediment to actually coming and talking to somebody like us. They feel like they should know where it goes, or they should be more on top of their position, and they're a bit embarrassed about it, so they don't want to come and have that conversation. And I think my view is there's no judgment. Everybody's human. Everybody does things differently. No one's sort of taught how to do this in school. So if you haven't been through the process before, then how are you supposed to know? Hopefully read Marc's book's a good start.
Yes, definitely agree with that, yes.
Yeah. But then, if you need some help, come in and just say, I'm not really sure where my money's going. How do I approach it? So,
and I think, that's definitely a good point that we don't really get taught about the school. I love maths, and I remember talking about compounding interest, but not really how that applied to everyday life. Definitely not on how you should be looking at your pay packet, how you should be doing it. And I know I definitely talk about to some people when we're viewing this that, what's an essential item, what's not so essential. And some people think coffee every day is an essential. There's definitely no way I'm going to cut back on my 3 coffees a day, and that's fine too. But at least you understand you're spending it on 3 coffees a day. So it's just important to understand where your money is going, so then you can make some informed decisions. And one of the things we always do is ask for a final bite. So Jeff, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
It's a good question. Good question, Marc. I like to read lots of quotes and that sort of thing. So I've thought about a few of those, but I think maybe I'll go away from the financial side of things and the quotes and reflect on something that my grandmother said to me, which has always stuck with me. I had a pretty close relationship with my grandma. And she said to me, I think it was about the time I was kind of heading off to uni and moving out of home. And she said, my best advice for you is be the boy your grandma thinks you are.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So yeah, it was a fair bit of pressure, and I think probably, you know, I haven't always lived up to it. There's probably a few things that she didn't know, which is probably best left unsaid. But I do think it's, you know, it's a nice way to carry yourself. Is, you know, if you would be comfortable telling your grandma or your grandma seeing your actions and your words, then it probably means it's okay, and what you've done is the right thing. So yeah, I think that was a nice piece of advice.
Lovely. No, I really like that, actually. And, you know, I'm plenty of years left of work and advice. But if we talk about in the book about year R, you know, what does your retirement look like? What's your year R look like? Have you thought about what that might look like for you?
Yeah, I have. I think it probably comes with the territory, because I'm talking to clients about this sort of stuff for them all the time. So, you know, it leads me to reflect on a few things, and I get to hear what they're planning. Oh, that sounds pretty cool. I'll put that on my list to consider, which is nice. For me, the timing it's probably about 10 years away. My daughter is in year 6, and so I realistically think I'm probably not going to be, you know, going anywhere before she finishes school. And maybe if she decides to go, she's my youngest, I've got a son as well. I'm not going to be rushing off anywhere before she finishes school and maybe uni as well. So that probably gives me another, you know, 7 to 10 years. I definitely like to spend more time closer to the beach when I retire. I love the beach, and I get to spend a lot of time there in summer because my parents live down the south coast, and we spend a lot of time down there, which is great. So I definitely spend more time at the beach. I might think about splitting my time between Sydney and the Sunshine Coast. I like the Sunshine Coast. I've got friends up there. Enjoy spending my time there. There's enough there to, you know, have some bit of infrastructure and, you know, things to do as well as the beach. And the climate obviously is pretty nice. Definitely like to travel more. But it's hard to envisage that right now. We're in lockdown.
It really is. Yeah.
And probably the other thing, I'll spend more time going to shows and concerts and sporting events.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a bucket list of sporting events. I've done Wimbledon, but, you know, a World Cup in soccer, a Rugby World Cup, you know, there's a Ashes at Lords, those sort of things. Yeah, definitely. You could spend some retirement years doing those sort of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, it's been great having you on today, Jeff, and just thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
It's a pleasure, Marc. Congratulations on your book and the podcast. I think it's great information, and hopefully people enjoy listening to what we're talking about and get some value out of it as well. So well done.
Thanks for that great plug there, Jeff. Thank you. If you would like to know more about Jeff and his company, visit their website, evalesco.com.au, and also have a read of their Healthy, Wealthy, Happy blog for some more great tips and information. I should also add that as I've now moved to become a retirement coach, I was so impressed by their team and services, they now look after my own clients after retiring from 30 years of being an advisor myself. Thanks again for listening, and if you have any questions or want to find out more about our retirement coaching and other services for The Money Sandwich, please visit our website, themoneysandwich.com. See you next time when we take another bite from The Money Sandwich.